And we're back in my car. I feel like I should have a theme song or something to explain why I'm in my car and what's going on and the format of these videos. But I'm not going to do that because it's pretty lame. But I think it would be funny to have some kind of theme song uh, besides just the thumbnail, and then you click on it and you get me in my car. But anyway, so yeah, I've been thinking lately about the format of these videos. I kind of address where the hell I am being in a car, and then move on to the why I'm recording these videos, which is a good question to answer very early on, because it kind of dictates how I go about things. And then I kind of finish with the blog post that's the backdrop for most of these videos, which kind of steers the conversation in directions that I've been contemplating, those being just thoughts or actions or behaviors that I've noticed in myself. And I think, it's quite important to have a formula, a pattern of behavior, a way that you approach things. And conversation is one of those things. For example, when you engage in a discussion with somebody, or you just say hello, or you know you have that kind of tango in the beginning where you talk about the weather, where you talk about how how's your day been, where have you been, just those little things that you both know doesn't necessarily hold that much meaning, but you find, usually it's like an uplifting discussion that's beneficial for both people, because they get to have that intimate interaction early on with a positive undertone, I suppose. And that's really important, and it's kind of underrated. And I wouldn't go as far to say that people don't do that. I think that happens all the time. I think something that I do, and most people do as well, is they forget about that, uh, especially through messages and when they're talking on the phone. Maybe not so much talking on the phone, maybe messages and text and stuff. You don't really get that intimate reaction before you delve into what you actually want to address or talk about. Or maybe there's nothing you want to talk about. Maybe you're just talking shit anyway, so it doesn't matter. What I'm getting at is that pattern in a conversation is important to uphold. It's lasted this long for quite some time, and you may hear people say, "Oh, talking about the weather is a waste of time, and it doesn't really matter." And, I don't want to bore you with why talking about the weather is important, but you need to have that intimate interaction at the start of a conversation, that you're both kind of getting on the same page and are in agreement. And then later on, you may, along the way, through many topics that could come up, deviate from being in agreement, or come back, or converge, or overlap, or have that sort of dynamic relationship throughout what you discuss. But validating somebody by having small talk in the beginning is quite important. And with this, what I try to do in these videos is have some kind of small talk or back chatter in the beginning, because it's the beginning of a relationship that's going to last 20 minutes, whatever it might be. So, I try to be a bit lighthearted and not get too deep into things on the surface. And I did say that it's an intimate thing, but it is quite a superficial intimacy, where you're both just engaging in positive back chatter, and you're not necessarily showing how you truly feel, or how you want to behave, or whatever emotions you're holding back. Maybe you're feeling depressed, but you don't think that's quite a good approach at the start of a conversation with a stranger. Saying that I feel depressed, even though that everybody should feel empowered to do that. I think there is a time and a place. Sometimes there isn't a time and a place at all, and you never feel comfortable doing that. And maybe that's something that you could work on. But yeah, back to my point. It's this it's this important pattern of behavior. That developing those patterns of behavior, which ultimately result in where you want to go. And it doesn't have to be about recording a video. It can be about how you go about your day, how you work, how you sleep, how you eat, all these different kinds of patterns of behavior. Um, and having a routine or a structure or a lineage or a culture or a tradition around how that should be is quite important. And it's easy to throw all that stuff aside and be this ruthless, productive junkie that only does everything they want to do and find validity in all the time, even when, for example, coming up against somebody else that just wants to have a conversation, a light-hearted conversation, and the other person just keeps hammering home what they want to talk about, what they want to say. And while that is important at times, especially if you feel really passionate and have a lot of conviction with your words, you need to enter into a dance with somebody, especially when you want it to be fruitful, rather than just lecturing people. So now, with the format of the video, what the pattern I'm trying to develop is to have that back chatter, um, that that kind of lightheartedness, and then talk about what I want to talk about. Because I don't really know where I'm going to go. As there's none of this is scripted. I don't know what I'm going to say moment to moment, and that's kind of invigorating and quite difficult at times as well. I might record these videos 10 times, each time kind of saying the same narrative, but finding a better way to avoid short stops and gaps in my expression. So now that was a tangent that, I think is valid, and that I like talking about tangents a lot because they're interesting. But I might as well move on to, the next step in this video, which is a blog post I wrote called Funny or Die. Now, I think there's going to be a slight, continuing, what would you say, underlying topic, which would be patterns throughout this, but I'll explain that maybe a little bit later. So with the blog post, it's called Funny or Die. You can probably deduce a lot from just the title. And that's kind of how I like to go about things. I'm very, I've definitely engaged in being quite sporadic and all over the place with writing, and in my life as well. But I think having a disciplined approach and going top to bottom, or bottom to top, or having a method is very important. And not sticking to that in terms of punishing yourself. If you feel like you're punishing yourself, you probably need to mix it up a bit, especially if it's something that you enjoy, or maybe you shouldn't be doing it as much as you are doing it. Now, the title, the reason I bring that up is because it kind of sets the stage. It is catchy in a certain way, but it's also something I'm holding in the back of my mind as I write. Now, sometimes I come up with the title very early on, maybe before I even write something. Maybe it's halfway through, but it's very rarely at the end. And the reason it's probably not at the end is because at the end, I'm trying to bring it back to the start. And the starting point is kind of if you follow the cycle of life, things have a beginning and an end, but most things work in a cyclic kind of pattern. We're born, we die, we go into the soil gives rise to life. Life manifests itself as a human engages in an intimate relationship with somebody else, then there has a baby, starts again. So yeah, that's just a brief little tangent of the cycle of life. But it's very much the same with everything. And if you can recognize those things and hold them true as a tradition, even if it's a tradition of your own description, it can put you in great stead to consistently accomplish things that you want to do. So I start the blog post just talking about my backdrop, which was at a young age I went to Catholic primary schools. I wouldn't say that I have a really particular religious constitution even at a young age. I was quite confused by it, but I recognized the validity in the patterns of behavior. So You know, the Ten Commandments, for example. Obviously, it's kind of hard to argue with those, even though I probably could if I really wanted to, but I'll refrain from doing that because it's kind of besides the point. Um, and that what it ingrained in me, being part of a Catholic primary school system, was just a code of ethics that is unique to a religious upbringing or a religious backdrop where you're being brought up. And it taught me things like right from wrong, um, and certain values, and ethics, as I've mentioned, that I hold quite quite close to this day. And I'm not saying that you can't develop those without religion. I'm just saying that was my first engagement into thinking about values, ethics, justice, right and wrong, those kinds of things. And mostly it manifested itself when I would feel guilty about something. And that's quite a weird thing to have, because feeling guilty is quite bizarre because you've done it. You can say you were caught up in the moment, you didn't think about it, it just happened and you regret it. But at the end of the day, you kind of knew what was going to happen. Maybe you just realized at the moment before you said it or the moment before you did something. And that kind of, I think it's the acknowledgement, the preemptiveness of doing something which you don't necessarily think is right, which makes you feel guilty later on. And yeah, maybe that's quite restrictive, but I think it's quite a strange thing to feel guilty about something. I don't know if humans are the first people to kind of have to deal with that dilemma, but it's a great guiding force, being guilty. And the reason it is because it shapes you into who you will be one step down the road, 10 steps down the road, 10 years down the road. Maybe you realized at an older age, as I have many times, things that I've done when I was young that I regret looking back on, when I'm looking back on them. And the reason I regret them is because, perhaps they were not something that I would say is part of my character. It was out of character, and perhaps that manifested itself from external forces like my life at home, or my position in the social hierarchy at school, bullying, for example. Pretty abstract way of describing it. And those kinds of external pressures put you make you react rather than making a conscious decision. And that kind of, that drives a lot of regret, I think, in people. They might not recognize it. And I hate seeing people crucified for those things that they do truly regret. It's very easy to look at something that somebody's done wrong in the media and judge them straight away, having no context, and also the fact that you don't know what state of mind they were in when they made that. Maybe they regret it. You have things that you regret. You have things that you've done in a bad state of mind or as a reaction to something that's bad happening to you. So who are you to judge somebody else at the end of the day? And it was weird for me at a very young age to feel that quite deeply, that to feel that guilt and that right and wrong. But it was a very good guiding force. However, what I would also do is, I like to laugh and make jokes, mostly of myself. People say, they often say, you know, uh, what do they say again? I'm trying to remember. What's the saying when you don't want people laughing at you, you want people laughing with you? And I think that's applicable to certain instances. But when I was young, I just wanted people to laugh at me, to be honest. And the reason I wanted them to laugh at me, because that was the validation I sought, was that if they were laughing with me or at something else, they weren't really getting the joke, because I was kind of trying to set something up in a way that brought them to a point where they'd go, "Ha, I see what you did there." And I don't think, you know, I often laugh when I'm making a joke or doing something funny, but that's not always the case. And especially as I got older, most of the time, it might have been a bit more communal. But at a young age, it seemed I wanted that validation to people laugh, and how I got that was people laughing at me. Now, yeah, so it's quite interesting having those two kind of things weighing on you as a young person. That being, a very strong moral code, you could say, that manifests itself in having, insane guilt at times. And then the other side where it's more lighthearted. And I guess that comes back to the title, is that funny or die. So, if you're too guilt driven, you may be driven to suicide. But if you're too lighthearted all the time, you may just piss your life away. But also that they can interact. And I think, even if somebody is on a ledge about to jump, metaphorically, I hope you're not in that position realistically. But if they're on an edge ready to jump, sometimes, the most grounding thing can be, as I put it in the blog post, a metaphoric kick to your forehead that, like a joke, that it brings you back. And as I say, in the post, is that the king is most scared of the Joker. And the reason they're the most scared of the Joker is because the Joker levels everything. They disarm power. And the king is supposed to be the representation of absolute power, or the archetype anyway. Or maybe that's the better use of that word. So, yeah, you, you, when you're on the edge, or when you're caught up in something and it's impacting you negatively, it is quite a helpful tool to have in your repertoire to just kind of be like, well, this is fucking ridiculous. How did this happen? Because it's not, if you're taking yourself too seriously, you're probably a step closer to death. And, and it can actually kill you, which is a strange thing, because you're so caught up in your melodrama, you're so caught up in what somebody said, you're so caught up in a drug habit, you're so caught up in alcoholism that you need to just disconnect and just keep going down this path of misery and pain and further away from who you were as a child, which is what a lot of people try to get back to. And you just get to this point where you don't have any reason to live anymore. And I think most of you know what I'm talking about and have seen people like that. And I've felt like that. And a bit of humor at times like that, when the stakes are pretty high, like you don't know how that joke's going to go down. Like, why don't you build a bridge and just get over it when somebody's about to jump off a bridge? That's quite funny, but maybe you wouldn't want to say that to them. But the point is that, I try to, affecting change in the world. It's kind of arrogant and very short-sighted, and not necessarily the right thing to do, to just tell people what to do with themselves and chime in and be like, this is what you need to do. Sometimes that's appropriate, I think, but it's not really sustainable, because at the end of the day, you do kind of have to figure out things yourself, and that's a very harsh thing for a lot of people to hear. But you're the only person who's you. So you have to find the meaning. You have to find the path. If you do need help, there's a lot of people out there that will help you. But that was something that would never interested me so much. I just wanted to see how far I could go. I didn't really need people making jokes along the way, because I wanted to break myself, and I succeeded in many ways. And then kind of came back and watched my guilt rematerialize, watch my sense of humor rematerialize, watch my emotions come back, watch my state of mind come back, watch my clarity, my arrogance, my negativity, everything, coming back from a point of self-destruction. And it's quite eye-opening looking back at the time, it's not like, sorry, my laptop just closed. One sec. So yeah, at the time, I didn't really realize the process that was happening as I sort of crawled my way back to existence. But looking back, that gives me a unique perspective because it was kind of like going shopping. Now imagine the shop was you, and on all the shelves is all the little bits and pieces of you. And you kind of come up to something and go, oh yeah, you pick it up and down, the expiry date's a bit off, you put it back on the shelf, you go to the next one. Oh, this is good, this is something I want to hold on to, I'll put this in my shopping cart. And when you leave as a whole person. And, I'm still very much in that process. It's not going to finish anytime soon, so don't worry, I don't have it all figured out. But that was a very, that was a good experience for me to go through that almost cost me everything. So yeah, back to the the blog post. In coming back from like that point of destruction and picking and choosing what I like, I've come back to having a serious side, but it's not something that it's not the only gear that I have, or being funny. That's not the second gear that I have, or the second thing that I've picked up off the shelf at the supermarket, is being serious and funny. There's obviously other dimensions to things, but at the end of the day, I think there's those two kind of black and white things that balance each other, being serious and being funny. But also, I would say that, as I describe in the post, that there's a depth dimension that works, that both those speeds operate across within my personality, and that would be support. So sometimes, I'm usually trying to support somebody in a conversation, which is quite bizarre. Sometimes I do get my point across, but most of the time I'm kind of like just feeling the person out and looking at what's going on with them. Because to be honest, I'm a bit more interested in them than I am, which might be surprising as I'm recording this video and you're watching it. But I am quite invested in the other person and just trying to support them with whatever topic they want to talk about. But also, I really like to chime in and be reactive and joke with them and kind of bring out that common thing that we can both be like, they might be a bit down in the dumps. They may be feeling, overly ecstatic. And, it could be a swift kick to the back of the legs that says, so what did you smoke when you got out of bed this morning? If they're a bit too, over the top. Or perhaps if they're depressed, I've got a box of tissues in my back pocket. Maybe you'd like one of these. Or like just to bring it back. And some people might look at you weird or whatever, but like the way I like to think about it is maybe they'll go back and think about, oh, that was actually a pretty good joke. But maybe they won't, which is another side as well. So we won't get too carried away with that. But what I'm trying to get at is there's, my way of supporting people is quite indirect. It's very rare that I will try to just be like, this is what you need to do. This is my life advice. Follow it to the letter T and you will make it to the other side. Thank you very much. But I won't do that. So what I'll do is I'll make a joke and I'll steer the conversation somewhere moderately serious, but I'll set the stage in a light-hearted way that there still can be that communion between two people of making fun of this rare thing that we call life. So yeah, now we're going to go through the full pattern of behavior from top to bottom. No, we won't. But what I've done with this blog post is I've just tried to address that, don't take life too seriously. Because when you do, you're probably going to take it more seriously, and then more seriously, and then more seriously, and then you're going to end up in real trouble. But there is a time and a place to be serious, especially with yourself. I think that's important. I don't tell jokes to myself to put myself in stitches. It's usually something that I'm watching or hearing that makes me laugh in my private time. But when I'm engaging with somebody else, humor is a great mediator across different cultures, different traditions, different kinds of ways of expressing yourself, and it's really a special thing that is, relatively unique in the way that we go about it, and especially the way that I go about it. It's not just about, a guy walks into a bar kind of thing. It's about building on the conversation, reacting to what they're saying, looking at where they're going or something that they want answers to, but not giving them the answer, just making a joke about their behavior so they recognize, it's kind of stupid, or that I'm judging them, but it's just a little bit, it's a little bit they should be able to laugh at what I'm saying because it's about them, but I'm not looking down on them. I'm just saying that it's either out of character or you can do better, which sounds very judgmental, but it's not, because I'm making a joke of it. I'm not saying this is seriously how I feel. I'm saying this is my sense of humor, and I'm expressing it with you through your own melodrama, adding to your story in effect. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.